Yo, what is up? Welcome to Ninja Geek Games. If you're looking for a light, fast-paced card game set in a fantasy universe, then take a look at Khedu from Upwind Games, a competitive 2 to 4 player card game that includes some resource managing and push your luck elements. During the game, you'll be using energy to play hero cards and cast spells from your hand in order to attack enemies from within the Khedu Desert, and may even turn your attacks on other players. The game has a very simple combat mechanic using dice, and the aim of the game is to score as many victory points as possible through combat before the limited supply of energy tokens you're supplied with runs out. Although the box does seem incredibly small, it comes with about 100 cards, 6 dice and a good handful of 2 token types. Let's take a look. There are 3 decks of cards in the game that can be separated by colour. This is the player deck that sits in the centre of the table that all players will draw from at the start of a turn. It contains multiple copies of 6 different units as well as different types of spells. The red deck contains wild cards that represent enemies from within the desert that players will attempt to attack and defeat during the game. For all types of units, whether in the wild or the player deck, they'll have an activation cost. That is the number of cards you must discard from hand to attack with that unit. The blue area shows the number of d6 you'll roll in combat, and this red area is the defense value, which is the total you'll need to meet or exceed with combat dice. These horizontal lines represent victory point values of the cards and are either 1, 2 or 3. These spell cards have an action and a cost, which is actually victory points that you've gained during play. The last deck here are the Shah spell cards, and these are very powerful. Each player has access to 4 different Shah spells and are paid for with energy tokens. The yellow tokens represent additional victory points that can be claimed and stack on cards until gained. And the game also comes with 6 cool looking combat die. This is what the setup looks like for a 2-player game. The player deck is shuffled and placed face down within easy reach of all players, and these are the wild cards that sit in 4 face-up stacks. Each stack contains 9 different cards in ascending order of defense value, and each of the 4 stacks is identical. Each player has access to 8 energy tokens and one of 4 different types of Shah spells, and also draws a hand of 5 cards from the player deck. So, Khedu comes with a few different decks, it's easy to set up, and apart from the spells, there is no other text on cards. From this, you'll be correct in thinking that the rules must be easy to learn. The difficulty, though, is reading them. A tiny box means tiny rules, and this makes it difficult to read. However, they are easily accessible on the Khedu website, and I'll put a link here. Now for gameplay. Players take turns placing heroes in their play area, attacking units and casting spells. As the game progresses, you'll gain victory points from defeating enemies, losing them to cast spells, where the player who has gained the most once everyone has spent their supply of energy tokens wins the game. So, what are the actions that could be taken? From your hand, you can place 1 hero into your play area, and this will cost you 1 energy. They'll also gain a victory token, but I'll discuss more about these later. But as mentioned, you'll need to gain as many victory points as possible to win, and you gain these through combats where you have a number of options. Your hero can choose to attack any unit in the wild or even an opponent's hero. Or you can instead take control of a wild unit to attack another wild unit or again another player's hero. Combat is simple regardless if your hero or chosen wild unit is making the attack. You select the number of dice as indicated by the combat value on your chosen card and roll them. You'll then compare the value of all dice rolled to the defender's defense value, and this is a nice roll. Now, what happens after an attack depends on whether it's a hero or a unit from the wild that wins the combat. A combat victory occurs if the combat roll equals or exceeds the defender's defense value. If a roll fails to meet this value, then the defender has won the combat. Any victorious hero gains victory points, but a wild unit that wins combat of any sort instead gains victory tokens onto its card. All players need some way of recording gained victory points. The rules recommend a notepad, but I use coloured cubes. Wild units that win combat collect victory points in a different way. They instead gain tokens that can be stacked and passed from unit to unit in the wild, but if defeated by a player using their hero, these tokens form a bonus to what is normally gained. But you can't simply decide to make a number of attacks each turn. In order to perform any form of combat, the attacker must first discard a number of cards from their hand to activate that hero or a wild unit. This means if you are clever enough, you can ensure combinations of combat take place for wild units to gain victory tokens on that card, then use your hero to attack the unit to gain those victory point values and any bonus tokens. But having a hand of just 5 cards limits the number of combat actions that you can take. Also, you can only ever have one hero in play at a time, and what do you do if their combat value is low? Well, each player gets access to spells either from the player deck as special spells or those already in play in the form of Shah spells. You only get 4 Shah spells for the whole game, and these are activated using energy tokens and are then discarded. You therefore should only use these when absolutely necessary, as playing heroes from your hand also costs energy and your game is over once depleted. Spells from hand are more easily cast by spending your hard-earned victory points, but should be used under careful consideration for this reason. Spells allow you to cycle through wild decks, reduce the cost of actions, or add dice or values to combat situations, and you can even interrupt other players' turns with their use. During the game, you'll lose and gain heroes, as well as reveal new units in the wild that can be used or attacked. At times, you'll likely put together a big turn for winning a good deal of victory points from combat through well thought out actions and spell use with a little luck. You'll need to decide whether to attack with your hero, a wild unit, who to attack to get the best of these, and sometimes you can do everything right and then roll poorly. It does happen. So, what are my overall thoughts? Khedu is very easy to learn and teach, and at best is a light filler. You will need to develop some strategic thinking with regards to the combination of actions you want and the cards you want to play, but it's not deep enough to cause analysis paralysis. I'm happy to start or finish a game night with Khedu, or even play a one-off game. Most cards in the wild share the same artwork as those in the player deck, but have different stat values on them, and I like how the wild cards get progressively more challenging, but then cycle back to the weaker cards over time. There are no discard piles, as used player cards go to the bottom of their draw deck. It means you are very unlikely to second guess your next hand, which I like. As mentioned, the rulebook text is minute, so you'll likely need to head over to the website, but you shouldn't need to refer to the rules during the game. I do enjoy playing Khedu, as I like casting spells, rolling dice and card play, and Upwind Games does this really well in a small, quick game, which is pretty great at all player counts. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel. This is Ninja Geek Games. Cheers.